Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Jeremy Smith and Eric Devin. It's turning autumnal now, really, as we head into October and the leaves are going orange. The pumpkins are already out, but who is ready to take on their new found colouring scheme, at least anyway, as we get into this one, and who's drowning in the depths of the cold weather? All of that and more after the latest headlines. Toulouse and Nice got us kicked off on Friday evening, but the two sides, who have had contrasting starts to the season, have ended with a 1-1 draw. Bassem Shrafi started the scoring for Nice, but Mathieu de Sevi's equaliser in the second half helped Le Violet stay in the top half, with Mario Balotelli surprisingly absent from the OGC Nice side. On Saturday, Lille maintained their excellent start to the season and remain in second as they ran out 3-1 winners against Saint-Etienne. Jonathan Bamba scored twice against his former side, with Nicolas Pepe sealing the points in the last few minutes as a Remy Cabella penalty was sliced in between those two goals from Bamba. In the multiplex, Angers and Strasbourg played out an entertaining 2-2 draw, with Leon Motiba grabbing 2 goals for himself before Romain Thomas scored in the last minute. Elsewhere, Amiens continued their decent start to the season with a 1-0 win against Dijon, who have now not won in 6, thanks to Samuel Gorosh. Guingamp and Montpellier both shared goals and also red cards, as 1-1 draw and 1 red card each. Marcus Thuram and Florent Mollet both seeing red, Andy Delors and Nicolas Benezet both grabbing the goals. And the final game on Saturday saw Nîmes and Reims continue their poor recent run of goal scoring form, at least, as they were both scoreless and ending in a goalless draw. On Sunday, Bordeaux continued their decent run this season and poured more misery on Le Canary as Nantes fell to a 3-0 defeat. Francois Camano grabbed a double with Yam Karamo grabbing the first goal, with the start of the Vahid Halilhodzic reign not going so well as predicted. Elsewhere, Marseille recovered from some mishaps in midweek as they beat Caen 2-0 thanks to Kostas Mitroglou and Florian Thauvin, while Monaco continue their miserable recent run as they were defeated 2-1 at home against Rennes. Damien De Silva and Hatem Ben Arfa scored for the away sides, with Radamel Falcao getting the consolation for the Monegasque, while Andrea Raggi was sent off just before half-time. In the final game of the weekend, Paris Saint-Germain ran out eventual comfortable winners against Lyon. Neymar put the hosts in front, but Presnel Kimpembe saw red on half an hour, giving a glimpse of hope for the away side that was quickly dashed as Lucas Toussaint also saw red and possibly had a controversial penalty decision waved away. But then Kylian Mbappe blew them away in the second half with 4 goals for the young Frenchman. That sees Paris Saint-Germain extend their lead at the top and also record the best ever start to a top flight French campaign with 9 straight victories. That's all for now, but to keep up to date with all in the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with that game this evening between the two heavyweights in Paris Saint-Germain and Lyon. It was an interesting affair, maybe a little more rugged than the affairs we saw earlier, last season and even a couple of seasons ago, really. Jez, it was an interesting one, but at the same time, really disappointing for Lyon, despite going down to 10 men, as well as Paris Saint-Germain, that they didn't take advantage when they had the extra men, but also allowed themselves to be really blitzed in the second half.
Yeah, it was a bizarre match. I mean, talk about game of two halves. I mean, this is arguably sort of a game of 3/3. And for certainly the first third, probably the second as well. Lyon, I thought, really matched PSG. they fell behind to a really stupid penalty. Correct decision, but a stupid penalty. Lopez last year got a lot of stick for rushing out and clattering Mbappe and causing him to have a concussion or whatever. And he actually gave Lopez gave a really good interview a couple of weeks ago to Ligue, talking about how much that and a couple of other incidents last year that the Marseille clash affected him and how he feels he's really growing, and it really affected his family and he needs to become more responsible. And I think so far this season he had been, but it was another real rush of blood to the head, which gave PSG an early lead, and even that was after they'd already Lyon suffered the blow of Fekir going off injured. But I thought Lyon reacted really well. I think that they were denied a very clear penalty that Di Maria put his hands up to meet a cross, and I think that should have been given. It didn't even go to VAR for some reason. And then the second third kind of descended basically into thuggery, with, to be fair, PSG kind of taking the lead in most of it. Kimpembe was probably widely sent off for sort of a lunge at Ndombele. I think Neymar was very lucky only to get a booking for a really petulant rake down Morel's shin. Verratti was got his customary booking, but that also was, I'd say, an orange at worst. So probably heading into half time, Lyon were arguably the better team. And then I think, although it sort of didn't bear fruit until later in the second half, I think arguably that the big turning point was Toussaint getting sent off for a second book of the defence just at the end of the first half. And he was distraught when he went off. He's had a really tough couple of weeks. He was dropped and missed the City match, and then was sent off in his return match against Dijon. And I think he was in tears as he went off tonight. But it was real stupidity from him. However young he is, he should know better than that. And really, Lyon were in the ascendancy. They had a one-man advantage, and they were already off. And although they were a goal down, I think they were well set up to really attack the second half. And I think that, although it was just before the half time, I think it really sort of stopped them in the tracks. And then the second half, again, it was sort of the first half, if you want, of the second half was relatively exciting. Cornet missed the sitter. Both teams hit the post. And then PSG just ran riot. And Mbappe, who frankly had not had a very good game up till then and missed a few good chances, scores 4 goals in 13 minutes. And they were helped a bit by Lyon playing such a high line. But it was just, I thought Mbappe's performance was sort of a good indication of PSG in a microcosm. I mean, PSG's performance in this match was kind of how the whole Ligue 1 looks in a microcosm. They can play poorly, they can have their moments, but they're just so superior in resources, in manpower, and everything. But they're always going to finish on top, however much the other team valiantly fights. And I'm going to be cheeky and say it, and they get a little bit of refereeing help when it's needed. So all in all, I still maintain that Ligue 1 is one of the most competitive leagues, but you have to completely ignore the champions before looking at the rest of it. And really, it's a competitive 19-team league, and it is getting a little bit embarrassing the way PSG are running away with it this year.
And that's the thing, really. And Eric, a lot of people will point to that 9 wins in a row now for Paris Saint-Germain, the best start for any team in the top flight of French football. It's a terrific monument for them, at least. But much like Jess said, I do want to pull on the man who most certainly be the one who will be talked about the most after this game, and that is Kylian Mbappe, because he did have an interesting evening, but at the same time, there's a reason why he's seen as the next in line, really, because he's a 19-year-old footballer that, despite maybe not having the best of first half, can have a second half where he grabs 4 goals in 13 minutes, which against any team is no mean feat, but against a team that the quality of Lyon, despite both teams being down to 10 men, is an impressive statement of just how good a footballer he is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that the sending off of Kimpembe seemed to put PSG back on their heels a little bit. It seemed to really stretch that midfield. Verratti, I don't think really was comfortable as part of a two against a midfield of the likes of Ndombele and Toussaint while he was on the pitch. And PSG really did seem to be rocked a bit there. And Mbappe didn't look very good, but I think that the removal of Cavani, which allowed Mbappe and Neymar to operate in a free role, I think may have been a better thing. I think that the understanding between those two and level of respect to those two, maybe it's winning the World Cup for Mbappe that puts him in a new light in Neymar's eyes and makes him recognize, okay, this player deserves to operate on equal footing with me, and sees Neymar play with a little bit less hubris, I should say. I think their understanding is really phenomenal. They were both making runs off the ball for each other, being willing to square the ball, and both playing with a far smaller degree of selfishness than we want to see we had seen from them in the past. I think when PSG looked a little bit rocky at times last season, it was because Mbappe and Neymar didn't really seem to be in the right wavelength. Both of them were playing with a level of selfishness and single-mindedness that really undermined PSG's attacking play. I think that allowed PSG to be kept in matches. A draw here, a less impressive win there. Whereas I think this season, and again, this is the textbook example, that even though there may be some problems in midfield for PSG, there may be some problems at left back, I think that their attacking potential is just that much greater. In terms of both of them having a freedom of a role and of a newfound respect for each other. So, credit to Neymar, credit to Mbappe for both. I don't know if maturing is necessarily the right word, but being cognizant of the fact that an evolution there was needed, and that's had a positive effect. So even in a match where they appeared to have been back on their heels, they could have, really been put in a difficult situation by that. The two of them put their heads down and continue to work hard, making runs, and the rest of the teammates recognize that, frighteningly enough, you don't need much more than that. I mean, Bernat had some decent runs. There's Meunier, but it was really the two of them and their chemistry that allowed PSG to be so dominant in a match that really, taking a look at the performance, they really had no business winning by that scoreline.
But that's kind of what sometimes 100 million, 200 million worth of talent gets you in those attacking areas. That's why they're worth so much money, because they can win these big games like that. And following off the Champions League victory in midweek as well against Red Star, they'll be delighted to have really started notching up things at least. But the worry for Lyon coming out of this one, Jez, isn't necessarily just the result really, but the early action you mentioned earlier of Nabil Fekir having to go off injured. It's always a little bit of a worry, and we have a twinge when he does go down and it has to come off, because we've seen before it can sometimes be a knock that takes 2-3 months for him to get over. Is that a worry heading forward if it is something that is maybe going to keep him out for a couple of games, that Fekir is so influential in this Lyon side that it could cause them to stumble again, not just in the league but potentially for European games coming up, should it be a long-standing injury?
It's a concern. I mean, he's clearly their best player, makes them tick, but I don't think he's had the most stellar start to the season. Arguably him starting to get full match fitness coincides with Lyon having their best run, and it's probably not an entire coincidence. But I think the team have got used to playing without him, and I think do have enough attacking talent to be able to cope without him, hopefully for just a handful of matches. But I think they should be able to do better without him than they did at the start of the season. It does feel that he really has become sort of talismanic, and it's not just what he does on the pitch, but just it seems that he's some kind of reassuring presence when he's on the pitch. But I think that if Lyon's form drops off again just because he's not there, then I think there's wider problems.
And Eric, in terms of at least their league form so far this season for Lyon, is it starting to worry you? There was obviously the victory against Marseille. Feels like almost like an age ago now, but at the same time, since then, they picked up the win against Dijon, but they obviously had that draw against Nantes last week, and then they've lost this one against Lyon. It leaves them on 14 points and currently in sixth with a couple of teams around them picking up points as well. Are you a little bit worried that that this may knock their run for the Champions League places this season with someone like Lille rising as well, or do you feel still have that confidence that they can pick up and win those games around them, and this be kind of an anomaly, really?
Yeah, I think that's not an easy question to have to face up to as a Lyon fan, or even as someone who wants to see a team, reap the rewards of a youth-oriented philosophy. I think that there were a lot of good signs from Lyon today. I think that a lot of this, without Nabil Fekir, the team really lacked a focal point. And Tanguy Ndombele had a great match, making a lot of runs and making a lot of really smart passes, playing, really at a really high level. Maybe not his very best, but certainly he looks to be back on the boil. That team that being named to Les Bleus, I think, has been a boost for him. But I think without Fekir, that this team needs an identity, it needs a cohesiveness, and that to me is a real question. Given Fekir's injury history, and the fact that he was slow to come back from the World Cup this season, I think that Genesio should be more coherent of what this team needs. You had Memphis Depay leading the line. He's never a striker. He was extremely selfish tonight. I know he did strike the bar by trying to chip Buffon. He had Buffon make a tip save from a free kick too, but Depay, I don't think, looks to involve his teammates. I mean, Bertrand Traoré is a capable goal scorer. Maybe Maxwell Cornet a little bit less so. Obviously, Martin Terrier being injured was a little bit of a loss today, because he's certainly the kind of player that I think would have allowed Lyon to have a little bit more balance, at least in a similar tactical sense. But I think that Lyon need to sort of double down and realize that, especially against a team like PSG, or even against a well-organized side like Nantes were last weekend, that relying on individual talent is simply not enough in terms of fine margins, because as we're seeing, there's more and more investment in Ligue 1, and there's more and more talent coming into this league. So Lyon are going to be matched in a lot of ways in terms of having the spectacular thrown back at them. And we can witness Bochilia's goal last weekend as being a well-deserved equalizer for Nantes. It's not as if teams are not spending any money or spending a couple million. Nantes, I believe, had a net spend somewhere in the 15 to 20 million euro. Sorry, not a net spend, but an overall spend of 15 to 20 million euro this summer, bringing a lot of interesting attacking players. And I think that we've seen that throughout the league, that a free kick from Depay or a run from Traoré is not going to be enough week in and week out. And those attacking players need to take a lesson from what PSG did. As strange as this sounds, given the individual talents of Neymar and Mbappe, but to seek to involve one another on a much greater level. We see that from Ndombele, we see that from Fekir, but it's simply not enough to have one or two players doing it, and especially when Fekir, as the captain, as that attacking midfielder, isn't on the pitch. It seems to just really be Lyon just really seem at a loss as to how to approach things in an attacking manner. There's a level of selfishness and a level of nearsightedness, if you will, that really stymies their attack. So while that goal was tantalizing the close for them on the evening, the fact that they didn't get it, I think, is by and large down to a narrow-mindedness on a lot of those attackers who, maybe they're eyeing a move elsewhere. I think in Depay's case, that's probably certainly true. Maybe they are like Traoré, having had a poor match in midweek, trying to reestablish themselves as being an important part of the team. Whatever the reason is, Lyon need to take a long, hard look at themselves collectively and realize what's holding them back. And it is that lack of attacking cohesiveness. It is a lack of selflessness that's making things so difficult for them at present. I mean, I think in that Dijon match, they weren't amazing, but the level of unselfish play they had and using Moussa Dembele as a target man, as a focal point, allowed them to make that result that much more comfortable. And I think in the time since, they've really struggled because of that single-mindedness and a lack of ability to play as a team going forward.
That's going to be the interesting thing, especially going forward. They need to, something we've mentioned a few times really with Lyon. It's a bit frustrating that it's creeping back in, that the selfishness of some of those attacking players really does hinder what can be a really talented group when they do play the cohesive kind of football that they are able to, at least. Anyway, let's track back a little bit, at least, anyway, because obviously we had an issue with our Thursday program, so we are looking back at sort of the European results a little bit in brief, shall we say. And we'll start with the Champions League. I don't think we really need to jump Paris Saint-Germain thumping plenty plus Red Star, so let's go on the more concerning one, at least for one of the sides, Jez, and that's Monaco's defeat to Dortmund. They held out for a reasonable amount of time, but it ended up 3-1 to the German side, which more than anything really probably puts to bed Monaco's hopes already of qualifying from the group. But there's still a hope of a Europa League spot with a doubleheader against Club Brugge to come. But again, another disappointing result that was compounded by a disappointing result today as well. But they were simply outclassed in that one, wasn't they?
Yeah, I don't think it's too surprising. Dortmund, in not having everything their own way, but certainly in sort of free-scoring form, and certainly in a much more positive frame of mind right now than Monaco are. So, away to Dortmund, which is never an easy place to go anyway. It's not the same team that played them a couple of years back. Certainly not the same circumstances, obviously. Dortmund on that attacking bus. So I think Dortmund were always going to start favourites, and it was, Monaco did very well to hold out as long as they did. And once Dortmund got the first, you expected them to score a couple more. But I think they were always. You looked at the draw, the draw for their group, and Madrid's, Atletico, and probably Dortmund were always going to be the favourites. It would have taken something special for Monaco to upset them, I think. So really, realistically, I think even before the matches are played, you just said that it would probably be down to the Monaco Bruges matches to see who gets to the Europa League. And I hope that Monaco gets something out of them just to extend assuming they want to extend their European run, but also just to get a bit of good feeling back. As you said, another defeat today. I just, Jardim can't buy a break. Two of the more experienced players probably responsible for today with a stupid red card for Raji, and then a mistake from Subasic. But to be honest, I didn't watch the whole match, but by all accounts, Monaco still weren't really playing with any fluency, and they need to get their act together. I think that Jardim has used Azat 2 matches ago, so it may well be more now. I think he's already used something like 28 players, and he really needs to work out now what his starting 11 or starting 16 are, and stick with that. I've used as the excuse the fact that they've brought in players who I just think are much too young this time around. But you look at the starting lineup today, it actually wasn't so bad at all. There was a reasonable amount of experience in there. If those same 11 players are going to get a chance to play week in, week out, then I expect that at some point they will start developing understandings and improving. But they need to be given that chance.
And that's probably the frustrating thing for Jardim at the moment, is it keeps being the experienced players that are making some of the mistakes that's not helping all the youngsters try and settle into what has been a pretty tough time of it, at least anyway. The final sort of Champions League game would be Lyon's draw with Shakhtar, Eric. We explained before it would be very important for them to grab a win from this one, but they were, while a bit disappointing at least, and went down 2-0, it was at least a positive that they come out of this game with something in hand, at least, especially with Manchester City winning as well against Hoffenheim in the last moment. But while it would be disappointing they didn't win, a point in the end doesn't feel so bad after how the game eventually went going.
Yeah, I mean, they still control their own destiny. I think that it's going to be not easy to qualify. I think that a lot's going to depend on how they can do against Hoffenheim, who haven't exactly impressed in this competition, but did give City a pretty torrid time earlier this week, and I think have shown that they on their day, or like Lyon on their day, they're a top drawer European team. It's just a matter of what Lyon comes out. I mean, how much of this can we write off as a matter of match being played behind closed doors? How much of this can we, write off as in terms of fatigue? It's a frustrating thing to look at and to see, Lyon be pegged back, but at the same time, the determination and the willpower that they showed to come back and earn that point, I think speaks a lot about this team and a lot about what there is there if they're on the same page as they weren't tonight. This Jekyll and Hyde nature, I mean, is what's been so frustrating. That Lyon on their day, I mean, well, what do you say about a win at the Etihad? But Lyon not on their day can be, frankly, embarrassing. And I think that it's too difficult to read too much into this match. I think that a point feels all right. They still top the group. They still control their own destiny. So, getting another 6 points, 5 points out of the 4 matches they have left, I think should be enough to see them through. But there's certainly no guarantees in this group. I think a lot's going to depend on how City respond to playing against Shakhtar and clearly Lyon against Hoffenheim, who are the 4th seed in this group, but I think clearly can't be taken lightly, given what we saw from them in midweek.
Absolutely, with give a City a good stern test. Onto Europa League matters now, and it was a little bit more disappointing, if you can say, in that competition on Thursday, because there was a couple of several results that didn't really go Ligue 1's way, at least, and just starting with Bordeaux, who will be severely disappointed in the end. I mean, Copenhagen were down to 10 men and everything, and they were playing at home, and they've been in decent form in the league for a change, but a 2-1 defeat with the double sitting sort of already bottom of the group with the double header of Ghent and Zenit to come as well, which you would think is the toughest test, especially having to head to Russia as well. Is it time for them to maybe write off the Europa League for this season?
I think it probably is. They've had a sticky start in the league. They've had lots of disruption off the pitch, and as they showed this afternoon against Nantes, they have got some talented players, and they could put a good run together. So maybe having not had the best of starts in the competition, maybe the best thing for them is to write it off and just concentrate on the league, where I think they could still achieve something. But just not good enough. Not good enough for many of them. It was really embarrassing Thursday night. As much as anything, the fact that all 3 teams conceded injury time goals, and they're playing professionals as well. But Ligue 1 is supposed to be one of the top leagues in world football and European football, and you shouldn't be expecting all 3 teams to be as whether it's naivety or lack of fitness or whatever it is. You expect better than that. Just not good enough.
And on to another team that's probably feeling not good enough, despite it being a long trip to Astana, obviously. Eric Ferren to go to a 2-0 defeat after the winning against Jablonec as well, with a double header against Dynamo Kiev, although they obviously drew with Jablonec in their game as well. So it's not necessarily all doom and gloom for them, but you don't want to go into your trickiest ties after a defeat and needing results. You would rather be with 2 wins and a bit of confidence, but a disappointing result for them as well, even though it is a long trip to Kazakhstan.
Yeah, I think credit to Rennes for rebounding at the weekend. I know beating Monaco is nothing impressive these days, believe it or not. But I did want to flag up that I do sort of worry about depth for Rennes. Ludovic Ball attempted to make a comeback in this match and was forced off, which still leaves Remy Bensebaini as really Rennes' only left back. Central defense is looking a little bit thin too. I know Jeremy Jolin was suspended for a pair of matches, recently in the league here. Rennes' defense hasn't been awful, but we spoke last week. I think Rich mentioned the stat that Rennes had dropped 13 points, 14 points from winning positions in the league this year, and that is why they sit where they are. I don't think things are going to get any easier for Rennes in the weeks to come. You look at Saint-Etienne after the break. You've got Reims, and then Caen. Both those teams are negative. They're tough defensively. There's not really a respite for Rennes to come anytime in the near future. So I think that they need to pick and choose their battles. I think that given the investment over the summer, I think that more is expected of this side domestically, and I might think we might see Rennes' Europa League campaign maybe come to be less of a priority, given the difficulties that they have in terms of squad depth. I know there are some players. You look at maybe Rafik Guitan, Romain Del Castillo, that haven't been used all that often, but I still think that the depth is going to be a bit of a concern for Rennes, particularly in central midfield and in defense, as we saw. For example, Mehdi Zafan make an appearance today. Not exactly pull up any trees, but it seems to me that Sabri Lamouchi is not really willing to give a lot of these younger players, or even someone like Romain Danze, who is apparently fit, and I know he's a little bit older, but it doesn't seem like a lot of these fringe players, so to speak, have the trust of Sabri Lamouchi, and I do worry about what the ramifications of that could be going forward, especially in terms of, once both the cup competitions start, that midweek fixtures will continue to become a lot more frequent.
Let's hope that they can maybe still pull things around. It's not the most disastrous result given the score elsewhere, but they'll hope that they can bounce back in the games against Kiev. Final one is obviously Marseille. Jez, they'll be bitterly disappointed really on their one. I mean, they were relatively in control, it felt like, in the Apollon Limassol game, but they ended up drawing 2-2. It maybe helps that Lazio also were defeated by Eintracht Frankfurt, so it gives them some chasing room, at least anyway, when they face the Italians twice. But we all know how talented of a team Lazio can be with the likes of Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto and Ciro Immobile. Obviously, they've got a lot of talent in that squad, and it's not the ideal scenario for Marseille to head into, especially with them already sort of a little bit behind in the league, even if they are now in third place. It becomes a tough balancing act now for them, doesn't it? That they maybe, do they put their strongest side out against Lazio? Do they maybe concentrate on the league now that there are a couple of bad Europa League results? It's a weird juggling act now, isn't it, for them?
Yeah, I think that excuse me, with all the talk of how they want to be this big club again, I think last year was probably a bonus in that they wouldn't have expected to go all the way to the final of the European competition. But this year, off the back of that, and of 1 more year's improvement, 1 more supposedly, and 1 more year's kind of settling into the new project and new management, and, on and off the pitch, I think a team that's aspiring to be a big name in European football again needs to have a decent run in Europe. So I think their situation is a little bit different to Rennes and Bordeaux, and I do think that they should be looking to have another decent European run. But for the reasons that we've discussed in the past, it's not the strongest, deepest squad. So that being the case, I think, again, like last year, I think some players will possibly end up being overworked or run into the ground. And you can sort of just look at Luis Gustavo's last couple of matches. It's sort of, even more than that, it kind of, I think, sums up a lot the limitations of Marseille. Gustavo, for me, I know not many people agree, but for me, he was last year's Ligue player of the year. I think this year, when he gets to play in this position, I still think he's a class above most others. But because of the lack of choice in certain positions, too often he ends up playing as a centre back, which weakens your defence, I think, and takes away your best midfielder. Against Limassol, he played as a midfielder. It's no coincidence that for the most part, I think Marseille were playing okay. And he scored the second, a very good goal. I think just after Limassol pulled one back, for some reason, he asked to be taken off, which was a bit bizarre. Even more so because he played today, you'd have thought maybe he was carrying an injury and they'd have rested him today as well. And as soon as he went off, the team sort of went a little bit to pot, and Limassol scored the equaliser. So I think it's just a case of all the same problems for Marseille. Having a really decent sort of starting 11 or starting squad, but not much beyond that. And that is, you'd expect that's going to pose problems somewhere along the line. It might not clearly come out until later in the season, but there are possible issues to come.
Yeah, let's hope it's not too much of a bumpy road for them, at least anyway. But it all comes down to that game next, I think, against Lazio, whether they decide to stick or twist will sort of be a defining moment of their season, at least. Whether they maybe try to go for a domestic trophy, maybe something like that instead. We'll wait and see what plan they sort of have for the rest of their season. On to matters that will affect next weekend, at least anyway, because we have another France squad as we head into some more UEFA Nations League games and also friendlies as well. We've got a friendly against Iceland, and then the return leg of the Germany game this upcoming international break, and a couple of new names in the mix as well, and there may be even more with Nabil Fekir likely to pull out as well. But we'll focus on the names that have been introduced so far, at least. And let's start with the I'll start with the man you know the most, at least, Eric. That might be the better option, really, and that's Tanguy Ndombele getting his first call up to the French squad. A massive positive for him, well deserved as well. It gives another dimension to the midfield with Tolisso obviously being out for an extended period of time with that knee injury. He feels like a good and comfortable replacement for his role in the squad.
Yeah, I think so. I think that as we look long term at how this team's going to evolve, I think that Blaise Matuidi, again, was fantastic this summer. I think that he was, he and Pogba, the discipline and the work rate that they both showed in midfield were really integral to the World Cup, as much as perhaps the likes of Griezmann or Mbappe took the headlines for France. It was that work and determination in midfield. And we saw tonight, exactly what Tanguy Ndombele can do. I mean, his ability to keep the ball, to get past defenders, his close touch, his physicality, really makes him, an amazing conduit in terms of starting counterattacks. And we know how important that can be for France. And but I think also, conversely, he also has the discipline and the ability to bear down and to assume a more defensive role if need be. I mean, we saw him playing after Toussaint came off as the deepest lying of Lyon's midfielders, and I think that, again, in a 10-man situation, he was perhaps being overtaxed in that role. But I think certainly last year we saw him playing as part of a two with Houssem Aouar and playing that defensive role with a lot more discipline and composure than perhaps an open match like this evening would have necessarily offered. So, yeah, again, I think this is a fully deserved call-up. I think that, his ability to play balls between the lines, through balls, is really, really impressive. I think it's fantastic to see him get that recognition, especially at such a young age. Again, I don't think until Matuidi's retirement are we really going to see consistent place be available for him, vis-a-vis Felicio's injury. But again, well-deserved, a good recognition of his early season form, and really, his entire career. I think that even at Amiens, he was a very impressive player as well.
Great to see him in the squad, and another position that needed to be filled, at least possibly temporarily for some places, but we'll wait and see. There's two defenders that have been reintroduced into the squad, Jez, and that's Kurt Zouma, who's had a decent start to the season with Everton, and also Mamadou Sakho coming back into the fold with Adil Rami dropping out after he's sort of seemingly half retired, at least anyway, from French international football. But what do you think to the two moves there? I mean, the Zuma one makes sense because he's obviously a young centre-back that's playing regular football, but at the same time, is it a strange feeling to see Sakho back in the squad as well?
Yeah, I mean, Zuma, I've got no real issues with. Luca Digne as well, by the way, who's also come back. They both started the season very well for Everton, so not too many issues there. The Sakho, I feel, slightly different. And I think everything is sort of read in a Laporte context, and that's the thing. I wouldn't, if you didn't have the sort of shadow of Laporte over everything, then maybe I wouldn't have so many issues with Sakho. And that Deschamps sort of made a very good case for Sakho in the press conference when he announced the squad. He said he was very unlucky to miss out in 2016. He was, there was the issue of a missed drugs test, or I can't remember exactly what it was. Whatever it was, he was cleared of it actually before the tournament started, but after the deadline for the squad announcement. Everyone knows that he was one of Deschamps' favourite players before that. He was the hero of the Ukraine comeback as well. He is a leader, and he is left-footed. So, and he was I think he was a reserve for the World Cup squad as well. So it's not a massive shock for various reasons that he's in the squad. I'm not sure that he's had such a great season so far. My only issue is that I do think that Laporte more than deserves a call. I think he's been patient. I'd kind of say he's been loyal, and he must be wondering what he has to do to earn that call. It was interesting that Willy Sagnol's comments over the weekend. He was the under-21 coach at the time that Laporte was in the team, and he said that he felt that Laporte was never particularly invested in the France shirt and was always wavering between France and Spain. But at the same time, I think, again, if memory serves, I think Sagnol still made him his captain, so he must have thought he was okay. And Laporte has since committed to France and said it's always going to be France. So while I've got no issues with Sakho, and Deschamps did kind of make it sound like it was sort of a reward or a consolation for all those the last couple of tournaments that he's missed. Although he said it wasn't for that, it did make it sound like maybe it was. So, possibly like Rami, it might be sort of one more kind of fling and then drop out of the squad. But yeah, normally I'd have no issues, but I would rather have seen Laporte in there.
It's an interesting backward step, even when you think that Clement Lenglet's on the outside looking in as well. It's very strange to sort of go back to Sakho unless he's looking for maybe that experience. But the last question.
Well, that was one other thing that Deschamps said. He did say, it's a very young defence that he's picked, which for the most part is true. So he wanted a bit more experience. But that most of them are still very experienced players. You've got Varane there, you've got Stephen, if he starts, who I still don't rate particularly, but he has got a lot of experience now. I don't know if that's a strong argument. You've got 3-4 World Cup winners in there. So.
Yeah, that's the interesting one, isn't it? You ask for experience, and most of those players have won a World Cup now, really. And like you say, Varane's won several Champions Leagues in recent memory. They've got a very experienced player behind them in Hugo Lloris as well, who's done it a lot of stuff as well as other players in the squad, at least. But I can understand maybe he wants that little bit of experience. But the final sort of question on the squad, at least, it does protrude to what's happened tonight, at least. Eric, in the fact that Nabil Fekir, unless there is a sort of thing from Clairefontaine in the next couple of days, because obviously we need to check in with them before he actually pulls out of the squad. But if he is to leave, there's a spot open, obviously, there. There's a couple of players vying for it. You would at least think Anthony Martial might be in that conversation. So maybe a Dimitri Payet, another name popping up for his performances for Arsenal recently, might be Alexandre Lacazette as an option around Griezmann as well. What do you think? Who do you think will be coming in should Fekir drop out of this one?
Well, I think if we look at what Fekir's role is in that France squad as being not necessarily a striker, but a sort of a Swiss Army knife type of player, I think either Martial or Lacazette make the most sense. I'm not trying to knock Dimitri Payet. I think he's had somewhat under the radar, a really fine start to the season for Marseille. I think that Thauvin obviously has gotten the plot. He's continued his good scoring form. I think he's up to 7 in the league now, if I'm not mistaken. But I do think that Lacazette and Martial, given their versatility, are something that's valued. I mean, we know that Fekir in a pinch can play all across that front line, even as a striker if needs must. And I think that he or Martial, perhaps Lacazette rather, or Martial make the most sense. But I did want to give a tip of the hat to Dimitri Payet's start to the season. which I think in another place and time, even looking back at last summer, I think barring injury, he probably would have been a part of that France squad for the World Cup.
Jez, what do you think? Who would you prefer to see jump into the squad should Fekir drop out?
I'd like to see Lacazette. I think Martial certainly had a great game yesterday, despite what Steve McManaman was saying. I don't know what match he was watching. I thought Martial was really good and put away a very good goal. But I'm not sure that he's done it sort of consistently enough yet. Again, not necessarily his fault, more his manager's fault, but not sure he's earned a place in the squad yet. But I think Lacazette has started the season really well. He's sort of forced his way, for whatever reason, Emery wasn't starting with him, but he's forced his way into the first team through his performances. Another really good showing today. I think the fact is it probably is for a substitute's role or for the sort of less important match, presumably the Iceland match rather than the Germany one. But I think it was against Germany that Lacazette had his only probably really decent match for us. But yeah, I'd really like to see Lacazette back in there. I think he really deserves it on his performances. I think it would just be a good sort of message to him. Keep it up, and you're definitely still in my thoughts.
Yeah, I think the start that Lacazette's had to the season, maybe he's the front runner in it. I think maybe, although there's calls for Dimitri Payet, they might be sort of still looking back in the past rather than maybe moving forward with a player that might see more frequent time should they continue to play well. And the same with maybe Martial's not played enough this start of the season, at least anyway, even though he has had some bright spots and he had some really lovely play with Pogba yesterday as well. But yeah, it feels like Lacazette is the better Swiss Army knife, because then he can be someone like Fekir who can step into the Griezmann role. So there be any issues there, at least anyway, much more comfortably than maybe the other two that are available to them. But it should be a couple of interesting games, especially that one against Germany. It'll be a key game in this Nations League, at least anyway. Let's finish off tonight with one of my favourite section, at least anyway, and that's the Ligue snapshots. And I'll start with yourself, Eric. What was the news from this weekend on Ligue that we should know about?
I think I don't know. Is this the cop-out to say Kylian Mbappe? No. I did want to flag up Lille's performance. I know we spent quite a bit of time praising them last week. A potentially tricky match against Saint-Germain, who I think have been a lot more cohesive and impressive this season going forward. They were unfairly pegged back by a penalty for Lever at 1-1, but I think we're perhaps frustrated to see Jose Fonch go off. But rebounded really nicely, got a nice performance from the youngster Dabila, and Nicolas Pepe was on the score sheet again. Jonathan Bamba with another brace. I believe that's 8 league goals for him, already bettering his previous season high at just 9 matches into the season. So again, that bip, the front line there of Bamba, Kone, and Pepe really clicking again. I can't say enough about this Lille side. I mean, certainly there are more tests to come, but I'll stick by it. I think that this team have the attacking talent and the tactical nous to continue to push for that top 3 spot. I mean, let's face it. Monaco are 13 points behind Lille. I'm not saying it's impossible if they can fight their way back into this, but I think even Marseille and Lyon, those sides that we expected to be up there challenging as well, are still a little bit off the boil. And I think there is genuinely a Champions League spot up for grabs this season. And right now, Lille look the best equipped to do that, particularly with the form of Pepe.
Absolutely. And terrific start to the season for them. And Bamba going back to his old club, I'm sure we'll be very pleased to grab those few goals. Jez, what's your Ligue snapshot?
For me, it's Saman Ghoddos winner for Amiens. against Dijon. There's a separate thing we were talking before recording about the really worrying form of Dijon, who I think haven't scored now in 4 matches and have scored only 1 in their last 5 or 6. Their form's really dropped off. But Amiens again are quietly having an effective season, and Godot's goal really is worth looking out for. Distance, a ridiculous amount of swerve on it, really fantastic finish. And as a Brighton fan, you sort of noticed massive interest from a very big sort of Iranian football-loving community since we signed Ali J. I'm not going to try to pronounce the surname, but I think similar thing for Amiens. But really, if Godos can maintain excellent form, I think Ligue is going to have a whole new fan base and a new star as well, and a very good replacement for Kakuta as the Amiens hero.
Absolutely, and was a star as well for Erstens last season, obviously for Graham Potter's side, a great little player. And for future reference, at least for you, Jez, it's Alireza Yahan Bakash. Thank you, Eredivisie Review, for reminding me how to pronounce that name several different times at least. My one for this weekend for my Liga snapshot will be Nantes, who continued their poor run of form recently, and they obviously let go of Cardozo last weekend and brought a new man into the helm, and it's not really changed things instantly, at least as much as Vladimir Keita may have hoped. At least a 3-0 defeat to Bordeaux and down 2 goals within the first 7 minutes tells you maybe all you need to know about this one. I do really fear for Nantes this season, despite having that change in manager, the up-pressed up, and there was a great stat as well on Opta earlier tonight, where the last time that Nantes got 6 points in the first 8 games was back in 2008-9 when they were relegated. So it is worrying form for Le Canary, and it's only really the sides above them maybe not quite picking up the points that they're still in a comfortable position at least. But there's going to be some worrying fans in the next couple of weeks if they don't start picking things up again, because you do start to worry that maybe Le Canary might be one of the teams in that relegation fight this season. That's all for this week. My thanks to Eric, Jez, and all of you listening at home. There will be no preview show this Thursday because this is an international week, so will join us again, same time, same place next week. A bientôt, and goodbye.